I've been working with caregivers for over 20 years, but when I first became a caregiver myself, I was overwhelmed with the guilt and the frustration and the exhaustion. I felt like I was failing. But the truth is that the system is setting us up to fail. In this video, I'll show you what finally worked so that you don't have to go through the same pain. Would it surprise you to hear that the secret to successfully caring for your aging parent isn't about doing more? But as caregivers, that's what most of us do. We push more, we give more of our time, we sacrifice more. And most of us didn't plan on becoming our parents' caregiver. We probably didn't wake up one day and think, maybe I'll give up my career, or I'll jeopardize my marriage, or I'll sacrifice my own health to do this. But here you are. And if you're honest, you're exhausted because doesn't it feel like the more you push, the more you give, the more you're failing? What if the problem isn't you? What if the problem is that you've been dropped into this situation? You've taken on the hardest responsibility that I believe anybody can ever take on. And no one has shown you how to do it. No one's given you any instructions on how to do it. No one showed you how to survive it. Wouldn't it feel like a relief to be able to quiet the guilt that you're feeling and the resentment and that underlying thing like I'm either doing the wrong thing or I'm not doing enough? Wouldn't it feel good to be able to care for your parent while you're maintaining your relationship with them and being able to maintain the other relationships in your life, your spouse, your kids, your job relationships? Don't you wish someone would just show you how to deal with the complexities that come if your parent has a diagnosis like dementia, how to help to keep them safe physically, but also how to communicate with them, how to maintain a relationship with them, how to interact with them without agitating them further? Doesn't it seem like if this responsibility was dropped in your lap, that there should be some instructions, there should be some guidance on how to do it? Because deep down, isn't that what you really want? If you're taking on this responsibility, don't you want to be able to be the best caregiver to your parent you can while maintaining your own life at the same time? Aren't you exhausted from holding your breath every time your parent gets up to move because you're afraid that this fall is going to be the one that's going to change everything? Aren't you sick of snapping at your parent in a moment of frustration and then lying awake at night just feeling the guilt of how you responded? I'll bet you've walked out of your parents' doctor's office where you went to try to get some guidance and you got little or none except the recommendation to make sure you're taking care of yourself too. Like, how are you even supposed to do that? I bet it's true that some days you look around and you look at your parent, you look at your other relationships, you look at your job, and you just feel like I'm failing all of it. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you a simple way to approach caregiving for your aging parent. One that I've used and have helped literally thousands of other caregivers to use to help make caring for your parent easier, to feel more confident, more capable, more clear, to make decisions easier, to be able to help you to maintain your relationship with your parent and in your other relationships, all while the challenges of caregiving don't end. I'm Tammy Provenzel. I'm a dementia certified physical therapist and a strategic intervention coach, and I've spent over 2 decades as a physical therapist working with older adults. I became a physical therapist because I wanted to help people, and at first I really thought I was, but I'll never forget the day that I almost left healthcare. So it was a long day. I had been working with my patients to help them relearn how to walk, to get stronger, to improve their balance. And I walked out to my car at the end of the day and I sat in the driver's seat, turned on the ignition, and I just broke down. Because for the first time in my career, I felt like what I was doing didn't even matter. Because I was realizing that my job wasn't just to help my patients. It was becoming more that I had to fight against the healthcare system that was setting up my patients and their families for failure. And little by little, it was feeling just hopeless. But let me go back for a minute. When I became a physical therapist, I didn't think that I was going to work with older adults. I thought I was going to work with athletes. But my first job was in a short-term rehab facility, and I fell in love with my patients. I love the complexity of their situation, their humor, their wisdom. And at first, it was really good. Our healthcare system allowed me to work with someone to help them to get back to their prior level of independence. So if at home they were independent with walking around, with bathing, with cooking, then I could work with them as long as they needed, within reason, to get them back to that level of independence, or till it became evident that they were never going to be able to get back there. But what started happening is that hospitals started sending us way sicker patients. The insurance companies were kicking them out of our facility much sooner, much earlier than their prior level of independence, well before they were able to do all the things they needed to do. And then families were left to pick up the pieces and try to figure out how to fill this gap that was needed when these people were being sent home unsafely. So my patients weren't ready to go home. Families weren't ready to take it on, but they were given the responsibility. It was dropped on their lap, and there was no one that was showing them how to even do any of it. So on that day when I sat in my car and I thought about leaving healthcare, I realized that if I didn't want to leave the people that I loved working with, then I was going to do everything in my power to not only help my patients, but to help their caregivers. Because if the system wasn't going to do it, then I would. And that's what I did. I ended up starting to help patients and families on how to push back against the healthcare system in whatever way they could. I trained them on how to help to keep their parent as safe as possible physically, how to protect themselves physically, how to set up the environment to hopefully limit falls. I became dementia certified because adding a diagnosis like dementia as a caregiver just is a whole new level of complexity. So it wasn't just in helping to keep their parent with dementia safe physically, it was in how to communicate with them without agitating them further. And as a PT, neuroscience, or the brain-body connection, was already a part of what I did. But I dove even deeper because I understood the way that the brain and body work together in disease. But I wanted to better understand how the brain and body can work together in health, in building strength and building resilience. And I started weaving everything I was learning into what I was training caregivers on. And it was really working. The caregivers I was working with said that they felt calmer, more capable. They felt like they could do this. But I was still seeing that there was something missing, because a lot of the caregivers I worked with would talk about the guilt that they were feeling, or the trouble that they were having with making decisions, or the issues they were having in the relationships, not just with their parent, but with their siblings maybe. And right as I was trying to figure out how to address those things, I became a caregiver, first to my Uncle Billy, who was more like a grandfather to me, and then to my own mom. And that's when I really realized that some of the biggest challenges in caregiving for someone who's a parent figure in your life has more to do with the emotional things that come up and the relationship dynamics that are involved. And so that's when I trained to become a life coach. Not to replace what I was already using as a PT, but to add to it so that I could address more of the real challenges that caregivers face. And in the process of all of this learning, these certifications, these trainings, I grew personally. I became more able to manage my own emotions. I learned to show up in a way that I could support my mom, but still protect myself, protect my own life. I learned how to deal with the dynamics that come in families when suddenly people have to become caregivers. I learned how to make peace with old family dynamics as one of 4 children that were now all caregivers. So I developed all these strategies that I could use in my own life, and then I could pass on to the caregivers that I was working with. And I started to feel hopeful again. And here's the other thing that I realized during that time, that most of us caregivers are walking around with an inner voice that's telling us, I should be able to do this. I should be able to handle this. I shouldn't need help with this. And when we can't do those things, we tell ourselves we're failing. But what no one really talks about is the reality that our healthcare system is setting us up to fail. They save money by moving people through the system faster, by sending us sicker patients, by kicking them out sooner, by dropping the responsibility onto sons and daughters, and not even caring whether they have the resources to be able to do it. The truth is that you were handed an impossible job. You were set up for failure. And the system has no reason to change, because your struggle, my struggle, saves them money, which is why we have to learn to save ourselves, and we can. So once I started seeing all of this clearly, that's when things really changed. I could help to train caregivers in helping to keep their parent physically safe, keep themselves physically safe, how to deal with some of the emotions that come up as a caregiver, how to manage some of the relationship challenges that come up. I worked with two sisters who were really struggling to make the decision whether or not to put their mom in a long-term care facility, a nursing home. One of them felt like that was the right thing to do. The other one was struggling more internally. But when we worked through it and we came up with ways to look at the pros and cons, using tools to make decisions, they were able to make a decision that both of them felt good about. Maybe not perfect, but something that they both could live with. And the best part was that they maintained their relationship with each other. I also worked with a family whose mom had a form of dementia that comes with delusions and paranoia. So she was always feeling like everyone was out to get her, someone was going to hurt her. And her family just couldn't interact with her. They didn't know how to be around her. And so when we worked together, they were able to understand what's kind of happening within their mother's brain. They learned some skills and some tools to use to be able to communicate with her without further agitating her. And they would tell me that they felt like they could at least still have a relationship with her. And then there's always a lot of caregivers who tell me, I can't keep my parent safe. I can't be there 24 hours a day. And that, unfortunately, is the reality of the world we live in right now. But when those caregivers could focus on the things that they could control, maybe the environment, maybe their parents' routine, maybe coming up with plans on what to do in different situations, then it feels like they're doing the best that they can to help keep their parents safe. And for me, this whole realization came together that my job was changing. It wasn't just about keeping my patients safe anymore. It was about keeping caregivers strong, because I was starting to see the beginning of a much bigger problem. So for me, working one-on-one with families always felt good. It felt meaningful. Watching a caregiver being able to safely help their mom or dad to move, helping them to understand how to communicate with their parent, how to have better conversations, how to maintain relationships, all of those things really felt meaningful to me. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore what I was seeing happening around me. The problem was exploding because our baby boomer generation, this is a generation of the most people born at any one time, not just in the United States, but in the whole world. And those people were becoming elderly. So that means more and more elderly people living longer, usually with more medical complications, and more sons and daughters being dropped with the responsibility of caring for their parent without having any instruction on how to do it and whether they felt ready or not. And the system isn't stepping up, at least it isn't now. Hospitals are still sending us patients who are much sicker. Insurance companies are still sending patients home well before they're ready. And their families are left picking up the pieces and trying to figure out how to do this. And I remember realizing that for every family I worked with, there were probably hundreds of others, at least, that didn't have any kind of guidance. And that's when I realized that I wanted to create something bigger, something that could reach every caregiver who needed it, to give them the tools and the clarity and the strategies that the system was never going to give them. And that's why I built Neuro Ninja Care.